Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. And today I'm reviewing Primal the Awakening from Reggie Games. Primal the Awakening is a campaign-driven boss battler game which does have single-shot missions, which we'll talk a bit more as we go through this review. I'm going to try to generally approach the high levels of what this game is doing, how it's operating, how the individual game sequence works, how the campaign works, and then dive into my thoughts and opinions, and of course links and timestamps to everything down below. Let's start with the general game flow, come back to the mission, and go from there. So, in general, the main function, the main way this game is meant to be played, and meant to be played is a loose term, but I would say the way it seems to be meant to be played is as a campaign-driven game that's going to have a prologue and then 11 missions to go through. So a reasonable campaign of just going through a bunch of prologue and missions, upgrading your characters as you progress against more and more difficult monsters along the way. Because the individual missions are going to be boss battler scenarios. You're going to have a scenario over here, you're going to have the monster you're fighting as, you're going to have the various heroes you have. You need at least 2 heroes in the game, so if you're playing solo, you are playing two-handed. Otherwise, just adapt around your player count, or play a full 4-player two-handed, a 4-handed game, as if you will, as well. But the general idea is you have these boss battle scenarios, you're trying to take down the bosses. Once you do so, you'll go through an arc of upgrading your characters, unlocking new things. You'll have a full campaign sheet over here in which you're going to be unlocking and tracking what you've earned, the various trophies of the monsters you've killed, the various forges and herbalists you've unlocked, the quests you've done, because there are a bunch of quests over here, and you're only going to be doing a certain amount of these because you only have those 11 missions to go through, so you won't be doing all of those. There's also the Hunter's Trial Challenge, as well as a variety of achievements you'll be tracking on your campaign sheet. One of the more notable things you'll be unlocking across the course of the game are going to be forges and then your own individual weapon pool. Forges are going to be this gigantic stack full of forges. The way these work over here is as you defeat various monsters, you're going to get various items from them. You'll get various elements from them, as well as various, bones or skin or blood or all those things, and you're going to use those to craft various weapons. So if you have the coral forge over here, you can go ahead and look at the resource costs over here, pay those resource costs. Each hunter has their own pool of resources, and use those to craft new weapons or gear or armor or items for your hunters in the game. As you progress through the game, you're going to level up your forge so you have a higher level forge and therefore can get higher level weapons, paying for those weapons as well. So you are going through a sequence of 3 levels of forges, plus the herbalist who will give you various potions, and you're going to be unlocking and getting more and more of those as you go through the campaign. So that's one way you're leveling up, is the gear you possess, the gear you're going to be buying and upgrading, and the materials you're going to be using towards that gear. The other way you're going to be progressing as a character is the fact that you're going to be getting various cards that will go into your item deck. Each item, and this right now we have a starting item over here, but each item has a breakdown of the types of card colors it wants in your deck. Cards in your deck have certain colors, red, blue, green, and yellow, and the breakdown of those cards is determined by the weapon you have. The weapons have abilities, but they also determine what goes into your deck. And as you go through the campaign, you'll be unlocking more and more cards and upgrading your hunter. There are individual hunter sheet where you'll be tracking your hunter as well, and you can earn more cards available to you, and you'll be using your weapon to define what goes into your pool. The net result of those is that across the course of these 11 games, you are leveling up your characters in the game. You're getting more powerful, you're getting more stronger, and you're trying to find the right synergies, the right combinations of gears from across the spectrum that will help you take down the monsters. And you can customize them based on the monster you're fighting. Monsters will have elements or weaknesses. They'll have elements that they are weak to in the game, which will give you more flexibility over what you can put into your deck. And so taking advantage of the monster's weakness will give you a step up, an edge over that monster if you try to plan and prep accordingly. But it means you have to have the gear available. Meanwhile, the monsters are leveling up as well. Across the course of the campaign, the monsters are going to start. The monsters all have 4 modes. They have the prologue mode, which is the simplest version of the monster, because I mentioned already, when you go through a campaign, you have a prologue, and then followed by the 11 missions. So each monster has that simple mode, the basic and most easy way to take them down. But from there, they level up into levels 1, 2, and 3, getting progressively more stronger, and often unlocking new things you've never even seen before. So it's not just that their stats will get better, it's that the second or third level of a monster might have certain mechanics or elements that you never even got to see in the earlier level. And sometimes the campaign will even hint upon some of these ways you can see and encounter the monsters, because you're going to encounter monsters at different levels, which means sometimes you get a little bit of a taste of what's to come. Of, oh, well, we've seen things like, I don't want to give spoilers. You'll get tastes of what to come as you go through the campaign, teases to the monster's capabilities. That's kind of the general campaign arc of Primal. You go through these 11 games and try to figure out your pathway forward, taking down the beasts along the way. There's also going to be a single shot mode in which you can go ahead and just tackle any single mission. The rulebook gets a very long rulebook, which we'll come back to later, but it's not it's very intimidating. It's not as difficult as it seems, but the rulebook will give you a lot of single shot modes as far as the monsters you're facing off against, and then various deck builds where you can either build your own deck or alternatively just suggested builds that will kind of take you to a mid-campaign point so you can go through and take down these monsters along the way. So that gives you the single shot mode, giving you the ability to, if you sit there and say, I don't want to play the prologue plus 11 games, and you could skip the prologue, honestly, if you wanted to. You don't have to do it. I think the 11, I mean, you can skip anything, but I would say that when you're diving into it again, it is very easy to skip the prologue and jump straight into the actual game part of things. But that said, if you don't want to go through those 11 games, you do have that single shot mode where you can just go ahead and put things together and just tackle them beasts along the way. Which brings us to what these individual sessions are like. What is it like when you're facing off against a monster in Primal? And the general idea is you're going to go through an arc of, well, sequences. You're going to have you taking a turn, and then, well, there's a round sequence, and then there's the hunter sequence. The round is going to have certain steps that start off, ways in which the monster is going to gain struggle. Struggle is an element that effectively is a little tool, a timer against the heroes, where as the monster accumulates struggle, he's either spending that struggle in order to activate abilities, or eventually he'll accumulate enough that he'll lash out and deal damage to all the heroes, which will scale in player count and will hurt you depending on the strength of the monster. But then past that, the monster is going to clear some behavior cards over here, which we're getting into some technical, I'm getting a little into the weeds over here. I should probably not focus on the individual details. There's going to be a general round structure, and then there's going to be a hunter turn structure. Each round is going to be tracked over here on this track over here. You'll be tracking the rounds. If you ever get to the end, you'll lose over here, so you do need to take the monster out before that happens. Although more commonly, if you are going to lose, it's likely going to be because all the various hunters have been eliminated, have been knocked out. So that's going to be the more common way you lose over there. But then from there, you have the hunter's turns. And the monster doesn't have a typical turn in which they do things. Rather, the monster reacts to you across the course of the game, and at the end of every hunter turn, the monster is going to lash out as well. So there's kind of a sequence or arc of how the monster operates, but it's not a typical monster turn. Rather, the hunters are going to do their things. Hunters are going to have a hand of cards over here. Generally speaking, it's going to be a hand of 5 cards, and you're using those cards to go ahead and take actions in the game, but specifically, you use those cards to pay for other cards. This card over here has a cost of 3 stamina to go ahead and play this, and stamina is paid for from the bottom edge of these cards. So you can use 3 other cards. I can use these 3 cards, well, these 3 cards over here to discard to be able to do deadly shot and go ahead and do damage to the monster equal to my weapon strength, but also whatever effects are on the card. And so you're playing with a little hand of what you can actually do over here in this 4 card types. There's going to be blue cards and red cards, which are attack cards. Blue cards will remove struggle from the monster. When you play a blue card, you'll remove struggle from the monster. When you play a red card, you'll go ahead and deal damage equal to your weapon's damage. Meanwhile, when you play a yellow card or a green card, those will effectively make it so that you're more defendable at the end of the round when the monster chooses to attack you. Now the problem with this is everything you do in the game has the possibility of the monster reacting. Right now over here, looking at the monster reaction cards, we have this card over here which says the monster will activate this card if there's anyone in either of his flank sectors. We have this card which says if you play a red card, an attack card, the monster will react. And if you start your turn in his front sector, then he'll react as well. And that's definitely happening over here. But this system of reactions, knowing what's coming, allows you to plan around things and to decide what's worth doing or not. Is it worth playing that attack card right now? You do have to kind of attack the monster eventually, although those cards also do go away. Part of the upkeep each round is some of these cards will go away, so you can kind of try to figure out what's the right tempo of when you can get away with actually taking down the monster versus when you play more defensive turns and hold out, brace yourself, and prep for a better situation and a better opportunity to do so. So you're playing this arc of being mindful of the monster's reactions as you choose what cards to play and how to play them. Then at the end of the monster's turn, the monster is going to go ahead and play one of these cards over here, and then depending on that strength over here, that's how many green and yellow cards you need to have in your card row. Or alternatively, you'll take attrition damage, which is going to be equal to the monster's level. Now, along this back and forth in which you're playing these cards, you're trying to figure out what the right combination of paying for one card with another card is in order to get those actions. Meanwhile, you're dealing with the fact that the monster is going to have different stances they're in. This stance illustrates where they can actually take damage. Right now, we're all in the monster's front sector, and his front sector, you can't even hurt him right now. We'd have to move to be able to have a chance of dealing damage to him at all, although that might change with subsequent stances. Then you're going to have these peril cards, which give you different things, usually ways the monster is more annoying, and then you have these over here, which are often going to be opportunities for the hunters, ways that you can either do additional damage or gain a perk of some sort, but you do have to earn those things. Well, more often than not, I happen to have one that you just get. More often than not, you have to earn those things in the game. And so you're going through a sequence of dealing damage to the monster as you deal enough wounds. So in this case, Flax over here, every 6 damage is going to result in you moving the wound tracker down 1. So you're trying to be mindful. You have to do chunks of damage to him to be able to move it down, because once he gets to 7, you're going to move this away he's going to enter the next stance, which again, sometimes will have different degrees of where you can hit him. In this case, you're always thinking for the sides, but monster stances, their vulnerabilities will change, and the peril cards and opportunity cards over here, these will also sometimes change. Sometimes they're permanent, they stay in play. Other times they're going to change and give you new things that are happening or add to the things that are happening in the game. You are trying to balance all of this. You're trying to balance your own gear, your own items, the cards in your hand, the abilities you have, the way you deck build it through that, your mastery over here, which is often something you can unlock, that once you do unlock your masteries, you basically become much more powerful, so you're trying to outlast the enemy and trying to figure out the ways to go ahead and gain all the things at your disposal, to use your potions, because you're going to have a smorgasbord of potions, especially as you get through the game and unlock various herbs and use those towards potions. And one of the nice things that I really like the game does is there's a different resource pool for your potions, the things that you're going to be using for potions, and the things you're going to be using for items, which effectively means that at a certain point you kind of have to use the potions because you're just building up these things you're not using otherwise. And so I like the game kind of not forces you to use potions, but does give you reasons to not completely and totally hoard as you go. But that's basically the arc of an individual scenario. You're dancing around the monster. The monster is constantly turning to chase the aggro player. That's a big part as well. There's a concept of aggro where any one player at any given point is aggro, the person where the monster is going to turn to. If I'm the aggro player right now, at the end of my turn, the monster will turn towards me, which exposes his flank to all of these characters, which gives you a lot of tactical depth as far as trying to figure out which monster, which situation, which stance, which behavior cards, what's going to drive you to act one way or to another, to move around the board, to stay still, to attack, to play defensively, to play offensively. You're trying to base that around all these situations, and there are a lot of things going on to drive you one way or the other, and it's up to you to figure out the right pathway forward to be able to go ahead and take down these beasts across the campaign. That's generally Primal the Awakening. There's single shot modes, there's the campaign mode, you're going on these fights over here, you're trying to use everything at your disposal, and you're trying to make your way through the arc of the game to an epic finale, conclusion, all of that. Which brings us to a review starting off with ease of play. Ease of play is an interesting one in this one because the game comes with like a 90-page rulebook and like a 100-page campaign book or whatnot, and at first that's very, very intimidating. I will say, to start playing the game, you only need to read the first like 20 pages of the core rulebook, and it's very, very easy reading. So to start the game, to play that prologue, you don't need to dive into everything, you just need to read through like the first 20 pages and ignore everything else. From there, the game gives you more, so there is more stuff to pick up, but even the initial rulebook is full of other things like one-shot scenarios, breakdowns of the hunters, deck builds, all this other stuff that you don't actually need to play the game. And so while there is more rules, there are more rules to go through, and there are a lot of details to cover, which we'll get to as well. If you are looking at the initial rulebook and thinking, oh my gosh, that's a 100-page campaign book, a 100-page rulebook, this is too much for me, it's not nearly that much by the time all is said and done. It is much easier to dive in. Past that, individual sessions will range from anywhere from a half an hour on the low end, but all the way up to 2 hours for a full long session. But I'd say generally you're looking at the 45 to 75 minute range for an individual session against a monster. And obviously across the whole campaign, there's going to be this arc, there's going to be the deck building and stuff in between, there's going to be the scenario progression, and all of that will take up your time as well. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is the card economy and the action system you have going on here is incredibly powerful. You're constantly going to have a hand of cards, and you're constantly going to have tools at your disposal as far as how you draw more cards. And you'll have teammates who get to play assist cards that help you draw more cards, and trying to figure out which cards over here are going to be able to combine nicely to be able to activate as much as possible, to be able to dance around the board, to be able to activate your weapons, to be able to use your potions towards your advantage. There's so much decision space around the nature of drawing a hand of cards where every card is both the resource cost for the card and the opportunity to actually go ahead and do something mean to the monster, combined with abilities left, right, and center. There's so much decision space around those cards and around these incredibly powerful combos you can get. You can have incredibly powerful turns in the game, incredibly powerful moments where everything you've been working towards, you built up that extra stamina, you have an assist coming your way, you've discarded an assist on your turn, you're drawing 2 extra cards now because, it's the top card of your discard pile. You can have everything working in your favor because the game has a limit of you can only actually play 5 cards a turn. You can discard cards, but you can only play 5 cards a turn. And most of the time you're like, I would never be able to play more than 5 cards, but sometimes you have those turns where you are. Sometimes you have those turns where you are able to play more than 5 cards, and you sit there and trying to figure out the right way to go ahead and just unleash full strength on the monster. Those turns, because you're sitting here, you're looking at Phylax over here, and you're like, oh my gosh, it takes 21 damage before he even gets down to a second stance over here. It's going to take forever until you can actually go out and kill him. It's going to take, I don't know, I don't do the math on it, but it might be 7 times 10. It's going to be around 70 damage to take down Phylaxer. And that seems intimidating until you have that one turn where you deal 24 damage because of the combination combination of cards, and you're like, oh, it's okay, I have this pacing down. Sure, I'm taking damage every single round. Sure, I'm getting weaker. And yes, some characters even get stronger when they're weaker. Some characters will be able to deal more, or their cards will be more effective when they're at half damage or more. And so you're trying to play this game of just trying to figure out every single tool, every single ability at your disposal while you take down these highly asymmetric monsters. Which is the second thing I like, which is the monsters are very asymmetric. The monsters do feel very different. The way they each operate is an entirely different puzzle as far as every single behavior card, the things that they get to do, the additional little modifiers or rule adjustments that they come into play with. But there are different behaviors. There's the monsters who are simply hard to deal damage to. There's the monsters who will flood the board with fire. There's the monsters who will start off very strong, but eventually will get a little weaker as you pierce through the shell. There's a monster who is constantly trying to just aggressively just hit you again and again and again. Every monster has a different behavior, and they feel different as you go through them. And more than that, as you go through subsequent iterations of them, they feel like they evolve as well in a way that is incredibly satisfying to kind of get a sense of how these beasts operate, to be able to try to approach them, to take them down, and to learn the nuances of what makes one creature stronger than another, or what makes one creature different than another. And you'll learn those behavior cards too. As you really dive into the monster, you'll have the opportunity to be like, I mean, even within a single battle, you'll have the opportunity to reapproach a behavior card that you already saw, and you're like, okay, I know that when this triggers, I just have to make sure that no one else is in a side sector. Well, this is inherently side sector. I have to make sure someone else has a green card in the hand. You'll be able to predict or learn the patterns of behaviors of how they operate, and so it gives you the surprise factor of something new being thrown at you all the time, but the ability to adjust and to learn even within the same battle of how to react and come back stronger against these things as you go through it. The arc of the game I really enjoy. 11 campaigns, 11 missions, plus a prologue, so 12 games total, is a very absorbable amount. It gives you enough time to feel the upgrade ability to your characters, the ability to develop and build a character build towards the way you want it. So you have that ability to see that unlock, but it's done across a reasonable time frame where it's not so overwhelming where you never really get to the end or the conclusion and you're burnt out of the system, but rather you get to go through the system, see what you have to offer, get to a point where you feel happy with your weapon, gear, equipment, and then come back to it next time, tackling one of the new characters. There's 4 characters in the base game. I think there's 2 more in the expansion, if I'm not mistaken. I have not played the expansions yet, but that's going to give you 6 characters, a minimum of 6 campaign arcs to go through, because playing through each character, learning the way their cards operate and the way they have their own builds is a satisfying experience for every single character, which means as far as I'm concerned, there's at least the replayability of 66, or I guess it's 12 games, 12 times 6, 72 games under your belt over here, 6 different campaigns to go through before you really want to start diving into different things. And there's still new ways to build or to adjust or to get items, or the campaign arc you go through, because there's so many missions you can actually go on, quests you can go on, but you're only going to encounter 11 in any single moment, which means in any single campaign, and so that just gives you a lot of replayability to the experience. And that's all with the campaign mode, but the single shot mode as well is incredibly satisfying. The single shot mode is also going to give you the opportunity to play this game without having to dive into the campaign, which is another pro on the game. And then the monster behaviors, that whole arc of trying to figure out not just the strength of your own hand, not just how to combine cards to pay for other cards and use the right abilities, but also knowing how to pace yourself against these abilities over here, the behavior cards. That's going to be incredibly satisfying when you have those moments where you're like, because sometimes you just have those moments where you have a handful of cards that will be incredibly powerful, but also it's going to set up a whole bunch of behaviors. Knowing when to pause, knowing when to just sit there and just wait, just give everything the grace of existing. Play a few defensive cards, bide your time, gather that extra stamina, and set yourself up for doing the exact same thing at a better time, because sometimes you unleash that first card, and the monster turns and swivels, and you can no longer even attack the monster for the rest of the turn. It can really undermine your turn. If you act too aggressively, there will be turns where you get a bunch of damage in, but there'll also be turns where you sit there and whiff and miss the rest of what you could have done had you just been a drop more patient. As far as things I don't like in the game, there's really only 2 things. The first I'll say is potentially it can feel a bit too easy in the first scenarios of a campaign. As you go through the starting campaign, it can be a little bit too, you can have a little bit too much of a hand on the situation until the monsters level up. Not in a way where it feels like a cakewalk, but in a way that, especially if you've played the game enough and you get a sense of the tempo and the vibes, I feel that sometimes it might be, monster dependent, because I haven't played against all monsters at early levels or whatnot, so it could be monster dependent, but sometimes the monsters can feel a bit too easy. I'll say also the rules are overwhelming, and it's intimidating, which although I covered, you kind of have to know that's not actually as bad as it is, but the rules are intimidating. The rules are also overwhelming, and it's structured in a way that is great for learning the game for the first time, but is terrible for referencing them again and again. The nature of the rulebook is really built around, hey, do this, then this, then this. It is not built around an easily referenceable thing. Even the things like the index don't have half the keywords that I want at a given point. So while they have an index, it's not really a useful index, at least not useful enough, because I'd say more often than not I checked something and it just wasn't there. They do have pretty good play rates for the individual characters, I'll say that. So a lot of the keywords your character has to have, those are pretty accessible, so kudos to them for that. But overall, I was constantly referencing things like, well, what does this behavior icon mean? Well, I have to go to the rulebook and find it. Where? Well, there's a section at the end of the prologue that I've been using the first few times I played, and then there's actually the other section hidden somewhere else, so I have to go to page 89 for the what the various terrain things do. I have to go to page 93, I think it actually is 89 by the way, because I've had to go there often enough. I have to go to whatever page, I don't actually know all the page numbers here, but you're constantly referencing random pages from the rulebook to find the information you need. It should either all be on a player aid, or at least be accessible at the end of the rulebook properly, as opposed to trying to have to go different places to find stuff. Again, the rulebook is formatted very well for teaching the game for the first time, very poorly for referencing things again and again and again. And that's further exasperated by the fact, well, actually, we'll come to it in what I can see others not liking, because this next thing is actually not a problem for me. But that's kind of the main thing I don't like about the game, where there's the accessibility of diving into the rules is a little frustrating. But let's go ahead and dive into what I can see others not liking, where this game might be a problem for you. The first thing I'll cover is the limited battlefield over here. This battlefield, there's a lot that you can do in this battlefield, and it's always, ever since the original campaign came out, there were people who were upset about the fact that you only have 4 spots to move in as the hunter. As a character, you just have 4 spots. That feels like it's not nearly enough. But the ability to try to force the creature to respond, to force the monster to turn or not turn, to take advantage of the few elements of terrain in the game, that little circle over there gives you a lot of strategic depth. Even though it's not a giant battlefield where everyone's running or closing the distance or whatnot, this circle gives you a lot of room to operate, but it might be something that you might not want. You might want more of an actual landscape to engage in. Secondly, I'll say that going back to the rules issue over here, I have personally found that I don't know if I've played a single game of Primal correctly. I assume I haven't. We'll be actually probably doing a film playthrough on the channel, but in general, I don't think I've ever played a game of Primal correctly. I think every single time in every single game, there's a point where I realize, oh, I forgot to move that stance, or oh, this turns over and there's actually a reaction, a rampage card, and I didn't activate the rampage card. There's always one thing or another which I missed and I only realized later, which means there's always for sure things that I didn't even realize later. There's just a lot of interplay going on, lots of elements of your own cards, lots of elements of your allies' cards, lots of elements of the monster constantly in play, so that you usually are going to miss something. This doesn't bother me personally. I'm having a fun time. I don't care that I happen to miss that one thing and I catch it 3 turns later. It's fine. I miss things for me, I miss things against me. It all comes out in the wash. But if you don't like that, if you don't like the fact that you might miss things, combined with the referencing of the rulebook and all that, if you really need every game to feel like a perfect playthrough, that might be something you find frustrating, because in my opinion, you're almost always going to miss something as you go. It's also very easy to set up for a really strong turn and then just have the monster react with a single reaction card in a way that completely undermines your entire plan. There are times where you sit there, you plan around your turn, you're going to play that double red combo, you're going to hit the monster's tail and he's going to react, you're going to do whatever it is you're going to do. But as soon as you play that first card, a card reacts, the monster spins, you can't adjust anymore, or maybe it throws down some fire in your terrain and you can't actually react or play cards on this fire there. Whatever it is, there are things that will happen in the game that even though you planned around a perfect turn, a perfect moment, even though you built up for the past turn or two to get there, sometimes it just ends up being a whiff turn, and you have to be okay with that happening in the game. As far as final thoughts on Primal the Awakening, when I first played Primal years ago, when the campaign first came out, my first play of Primal, I was intrigued. My second play of Primal, I liked it, and my third play of Primal, I was very much in love with this game system. It's a game that, for the longest time, the only prototype box I ever had on my shelf was Primal. If you go through older videos again and again for the past 4 years, in the top left corner I had a Primal box just sitting there, a prototype box just sitting there, because I was eagerly anticipating this game for the longest time. Because I remembered how much fun I had, how powerful I felt in this game as you had these turns, as the monster was sitting there being difficult enough that it was rewarding, but you had the opportunity to try to do whatever it is you needed to do, to even have cinematic moments as you worked together and unleashed against the monster. It was an incredibly satisfying experience. And so I sat there for years waiting with bated breath for this game to finally arrive. And then it finally did arrive. And I took my time with it. I didn't want to rush out a review right away. I wanted to play it, but not just play it. I wanted to go through it to actually experience it in a way that I never had the chance to do so the first time round, because the first time round I never got to do a campaign. There were only single shot experiences. There was the basic prologue and then some single shots, and that's what I got to play the first time round. And so to be able to actually go through this game, to be able to actually play through the campaign arc, to be able to face off against proper monsters, to be able to build my character and develop it the way you're supposed to, these are all things I want to take my time with before reviewing the game. And this is one of those games. Everything that I liked the first time around is still there. Years later, every single thing I enjoyed is still very much present, and everything I remember liking is there, and the things I didn't get to experience, I enjoy as well. Primal, to me, is a game that gives you the best of everything. It gives you the best of strategic play. It gives you the best of a little bit of unpredictability, so it's not perfectly planned. It gives you the best of a single shot experience because it's accessible and you can play strong single shots. But it gives you the best of an accessible campaign game that gives you that campaign arc, but without being so overwhelming that it's too much, because, again, a single mission can be anywhere from 30 minutes to 60 minutes, and across those 12 missions, that's just not a ton of time. It gives you a lot of excellent things going on. It gives you production. It gives you the best of production. It gives you the worst of managing boxes and storage and all that, because, I mean, the box is already intimidating and obnoxious, and if you sleeve your cards, it's a whole different conversation as to how you're going to manage. So if you want another ding against it, I guess we can go ahead and give it a ding of the giant amount of box space, or where does this even go? I still haven't figured out how I'm going to store it, but it is definitely going to be stored. I love everything about Primal. This is an incredibly satisfying experience that every single time I play a game, I want to just go ahead and build my character for the next round and then play it again. I have to remind myself that this is a game that you shouldn't play, 12 games in a row. I'll play 2 or 3 games and then come back to it later because I have to take a break and function. Primal The Awakening is arguably my favorite boss battler that I've played. I think arguably is just a pause to make sure, but I'm pretty sure it's my favorite boss battling game that I personally have played. To me, this is a 5 out of 5. It was a 5 out of 5 when I played it 3 years ago, and it's a 5 out of 5 now. This is a game that everything that I was looking forward to, everything I remembered, is still present. I really enjoy this game. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. As far as other game recommendations, I'm actually going to give 3 this time. I usually only give 2, but we're going to give 3. First of all, I'll say if you want another game that has a short and accessible campaign in a way that makes the campaign add to the experience instead of taking away from it, at least for me, is going to be Wild Ascent. If you're looking for another boss battler, one that is very, very highly recommended by basically everyone, Oathsworn is one that's worth checking out. Oathsworn, Shadows of the Deep Ward, or Into the Deep Ward, something like that. And then lastly, if you want a game that has a similar card strategic aspect to it in terms of the deck building, in terms of the way you're going to have your cards being both a resource and the card itself, it gives you the card play in Primal is very similar to the card play in Marvel Champions, and I think if you enjoy one, you likely will enjoy the other. In any case, then until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.